Wild Robot. It's time. Chapter 70. The Hunt Begins. Whilst Flock distracted the Ricos, Brightbill darted around to them and desperately searched for the button. He had once shut down his own mother with a click, but now he would do the same to these intruders. But he found no buttons on these robots, only smooth surfaces. Clearly, the Ricos were not designed to be shut down so easily. Giant hands swung through the air, and the geese were swatted away. Loudwing was plucked by her foot and flung to the ground. She crawled into the weeds as the others scrambled up and over the trees. A quick scan by the robots revealed that Roz was gone. The three Ricos turned and marched back to their airship. The door hummed open, and the robots disappeared inside. And when they stepped back into the meadow, each was holding a silver rifle in his hands. The hunt for Roz was on. Without speaking, the Ricos marched away from one another, fanning out in their standard search pattern. Rico 1 marched straight toward the southern tip of the island. Rico 2 marched straight up the mountainside, and Rico 3 marched straight into the forest. Chapter 71. The Forest Assault. Rico 3 marched through the forest with steady, stomping strides. His blocky head swiveled from side to side, scanning for any sign of Roz. But he was distracted. You see, everywhere the Rico went, he was met by shrieking animals. He didn't know it, but he was in the midst of a coordinated assault. Swooper hooted orders from above. Hawks, sparrows, owls, dive in front for his eyes. Fink barked orders from below. Hares, weasels, foxes, dash between his legs. The forest was seething with an army of wild animals, distracting the robot, luring the terrible thing deeper into their trap. Chit-Chat leaped from the branches and clawed at the robot's eyes, yelling, Anyone who shows up and tries to take my friend's mother away from the island is a big problem with me. Then she leaped back into the branches. The robot pointed his rifle at the squirrel and pulled the trigger. A blazing beam of light shot through the forest and sent tree limbs crashing to the ground. It grazed poor Chit-Chat, singeing the end of her tail, but she ignored the pain and scurried up to the safety of the canopy. With each stride, the ground grew a little softer, and the robot sank a little deeper, until he was up to his waist in thick, heavy muck. His churning legs slowed to a stop, and he stood there, computing whether or not to move forward or backwards. Rico 3 was now an easy target. Begin the bombardment, ordered Swooper. The sky darkened as a swarm of birds descended from the tree tops. They swooped past the robot and splattered his face with their droppings. Bird after bird swooped and splattered, and the Rico's eyes were instantly caked in filth. Yucky filth. Don't let up, screeched the owl. Give it everything you've got. There seemed to be an endless stream of birds with an endless amount of droppings. Rico 3 let go of his weapon and wiped his filthy face with both hands. That was the moment the fuzzy bandits were waiting for. They dashed out of the weeds, snatched up the rifle with their nimble hands, and dragged it away. Tawny, the crown point, looked on from the underbrush. The buck lowered his head, and the raccoons carefully placed the rifles upon his antlers. Then the deer and the raccoons slipped into the shadows. By the time Rico 3 realized his weapon was missing, it was too late. He let out a sad electronic tone, and then, as the birds continued their bombardment, the robot turned and blindly trudged back through the muck. It was now time for the final stage of the plan. Broadfoot the bull moose emerged from the trees and stood directly in the path of the blinded robot. Rico 3 had no idea that his every step brought him closer to the mighty animal. When the robot was in range, Broadfoot turned and kicked back with his powerful hind legs. There was a sharp crack, and dung sprayed from the Rico's head. The moose kicked again, crack, and the robot's head flopped to one side. A tear in his neck exposed a tangle of silver tubes, but Rico 3's legs kept pumping, so Broadfoot kept kicking. He pounded the robot head with his heavy hooves, denting and crushing it into an ugly shape, and then, with one final crack, the head broke loose, soared through the air, and squelched into the muck. The headless robot fizzled and smoked. The legs ground to a halt and never moved again. Oh! Animals versus robots. Chapter 72. That's going to be in next time. That's called The Mountain Rumble. And we'll see ya. Thanks for joining.